Okay, welcome to another edition of the Critical Lowdown from EPS. So I'm Barry McGinley. I'm the head of technical for EPS and EMEA. And today we're going to talk to IP Infusion. So IP Infusion, or IPI as we call them, are a software company in the open networking or disaggregated space, whichever term you favor. We've been working with IPI for many years. And today we're going to have a chat with them about their latest software release, what that means for open networking, and in particular for data center networking. So today I have Vince Schuele, who's the Director of Technical Solutions for Partners in EMEA and India from IPI. So welcome, Vince.
Thanks for having me today, Barry. So, as Barry said, I'm the Director of Technical Solutions for Partners in EMEA and India for IP Infusion, and I'm excited to chat with everybody today about what we have going on in the data center and our latest release.
Great to have you here. So if we get started, and if you can tell us actually a little bit about yourself, Vince, because I've spoken to you before and you have a kind of interesting history how you were involved in networking. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Yeah, so I started in networking in the U.S. military. I worked in Europe as part of building out some of the NATO networks there for European theater, and then I moved over to a systems integrator after that and built ISPs as a consultant for quite some time before I joined IP Infusion now, and really passionate about the open and disaggregated networking space. So excited to be able to continue as one of the leaders in the space with IP Infusion.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting anyway. So we're 10 years now, 12 years a partner of EdgeCore, which got us into it, which obviously the hardware is no use without the software, so which led us to kind of work with IPI. Can you explain a little about IPI actually? So I know we've done a lot of work with IPI in the telecoms industry, but can you explain a little about their history, where they came from and where they are to this point, I suppose?
Yeah, so IP Infusion started over 20 years ago, where we originally were selling source code previously known as ZebOS and now known as OcNOS control plane. We also offer another flavor of that called OcNOS Flex, which is for putting in, if a ODM has some gear that they want to run and they want IP Infusion on it and they don't want to integrate the source code, then we'll help them integrate that. And then we have our commercial offering, which is what we'll be focusing on today. And it's been around for, I think, about 8 years now, which is OcNOS. And mostly we integrate that onto Broadcom merchant silicon with ODM partners such as UfiSpace, EdgeCore, Celestica, and Dell, Delta. And we have a service provider code base and we have a data center offering. So when you buy that and you get OcNOS service provider or data center, then we load our software onto those white box switches, and then you essentially have a router that looks, feels, and operates like some of the other routers that you're used to running with.
Okay, and on the telecom side, before we kind of dig into the data center side of things, I know from working with TIP, you guys have worked with OCP and TIP, some successes in that area. Can you explain a little about some of the successes you've had on the telecom side?
Yeah, so when you look at us, we've been we align great with TIP. We've been a gold badge member for several years. We've also participated in the ORAN Plugfest, and then GigaOM has recognized us for 3 years straight as the leader in disaggregated networking. So we've had a lot of successes there from kind of the leading organizations in disaggregated space, and you can see this as it carries over into the customer announcements that we've been doing. I think this year alone we've had 10 or 12 customer announcements of customer wins. Large providers across the board. Netomnia in the UK comes to mind, a big wholesale provider where they're using our service provider platforms to deliver connectivity out to, I think they're at 1 million homes passed now. So really we've been getting a lot of a lot of success there. In the US, we've got the same thing going on. So Vive Broadband, if you haven't seen that webinar, we talked to them, and they're a broadband provider in the US, and they've been a big user of our OcNOS service provider offerings.
Great. Yeah, and as well, just to add to that, I know ourselves as well have had lots of success with kind of the biggest telcos in Africa as well. So Africell, Comsol, there was Afrabone in Mali we've worked with. So there's successes all over, and not just in one single area, in lots of different areas for the telecoms network. So moving on, I suppose, we're going to talk a little today about the data center side of things. So why focus on the data center now? I know you guys you never didn't focus on the data center, but there was a lot of focus and there was a lot of big wins on the telecom side. So why come back to the data center, and why kind of expand on your data center portfolio now? What's the timing? What's the reason behind the timing, I suppose?
Yeah, so I think if you've been following us, as you saw, we've had all these really awesome wins, and at the beginning of the year we're showing 800% growth on one of our press releases, and we've been able to take that those wins from the service provider and start moving them into the data center. So we've always had a little bit of a data center presence. One of our original customers was Lynx and their IXP in London, right in your backyard, and they're one of our data center customers that we're really just expanding, taking that success that we've had in the service provider market and moving it over to the data center market now to expand those offerings, bring new switches on board. We see a lot of excitement here. We see a lot of really interesting opportunities, and we've really put a lot of focus into our EVPN deployments, both with MPLS underlays and VXLAN underlays. So, or not underlays, but data planes. So.
Okay, yeah, and we'll get into kind of use cases and look at that a little bit more in a few minutes. But so on the data center side, I know you guys released 6.3 recently, and there was a lot of talk about it. What did you add on the hardware platforms wise as well, and on the software side? So on the kind of on the feature list for data center, and as well, what is maybe coming down the road after 6.3 for specifically data centers?
Yeah, but great question. We've been added 2 new platforms as part of the 6.3 release, with support for a new 10 gig switch for top of rack based off Trident. That is a leaf switch. It does got the copper ports, so 48 by 10 gig. And then it's got 600 gig uplinks. Then we added a management switch that's got 10,000 base T, just for out of band management, layer 2, layer 3 functionality. It doesn't support anything in terms of VXLAN or EVPN, but it does provide you that one-stop shop of be able to round out your portfolio, so you can have support on the management side, the data center fabric side, the switching fabric, and then also with DCI with our service provider platforms, if you need to go into MPLS or add support for ZR plus optics, we've added support for that within 6.3. And as well, we continue to support our Cassini offering, which is a spine switch that you can use for DCI with some CFP2s, and it's the first open optical packet transponder. So we've had a lot of success there, and based off Tomahawk to serve as that DCI from a spine switch.
Okay, and that 1 gig switch, that's Celestica, is it?
Yeah, that's a Celestica switch, and as we go down in 6.4 and 6.5 releases, we're going to be bringing on more Celestica as well. That's not just management, but actual leaf switches. So Trident, Tomahawk, to be able to have more diversity in the choice of hardware platforms. So, we didn't really talk about this a little bit earlier, but that's one of the really big advantages of disaggregated networking is that freedom of hardware choice of being able to get hardware from different ODMs and place the same software across that.
Yeah, I'll echo that, because during COVID with the chip shortages, we were able to switch from UFI to EdgeCore to UFI, because you guys had done the work on the Qumran chips on both boxes. So choice it obviously brings pricing down as well. But just on that, going back to that 1 gig switch, that's really good to hear, because the pricing for 1 gig switches has been really restrictive over the last while. It's crazy. So another offering in that area will be really good.
Okay.
And go on, sorry.
Something else, is back to that freedom of choice that we were just talking about. When on that webinar I mentioned earlier, the number one reason that people had answered on the poll for going to disaggregated was the freedom of choice. So, we're continuing to expand that as we leverage more ODM partners and bring more platforms on board on part of our releases.
Yeah, that's the idea of open networking, that you have that choice, and then will drive the price of those switches down and those routers down for the consumer. Okay, so moving on to the use cases. Look, you touched on EVPN over VXLAN. Well, so what for the data center would be? So obviously you have your normal layer 3, layer 2, layer 3 plus BGP. After that, what would be the kind of most commonly deployed use case that you would see using OcNOS?
Yeah, so we typically see, it's like you said, the spine and leaf topologies where we're going with BGP overlay, VXLAN for the data plane, and then you can have that multi-tenancy across the board of, layer 2 isolation, layer 2 VPNs, Anycast gateways for if you want to have the Anycast gateway at the top of the rack, or we do support the centralized gateway methodology as well. But really, we're seeing, especially most of our successes on those on IXP deployments. So I mentioned links already. They're a EVPN, VXLAN fabric, and then being able to provide those layer 2 segments for their customers, hit the route servers, go in and out, or if you want private interconnects, then you can have additional additional layer 2 segments between those and get the interconnects between the fabric members.
Okay, and on the telco side, so what kind of solutions do you offer here? Because obviously they have different requirements sometimes.
Yeah, so this is where having the same OcNOS between DC and service provider really has started to help us, because we're able to utilize DNX-based platforms, so the Qumran 2, soon we'll have Jericho 2 platform, that we can bring that into the same fabric, and you have the same operations across the board. So it's looks, feels, operates the same, whether you're on the management side, which we talked about earlier, you're doing Trident or Tomahawk with the DC side, or if you bring in what we'll call a service provider router into the DC, but it's really just a different chip. It's got they have deeper buffers, they have more route scale. So on those platforms, we've enabled ZR plus ports. So we have several platforms now where you can utilize those coherent optics at 400 gig. And then we also have platforms that we've brought online that have internet route scale. So you can get up to 2 or 3 million routes. You can, one of the OP2 options, that external TCAM, that brings us up to 20 million routes. So now there's options in that where you can actually service not only the data center fabric side, but the internet gateway as well as the DCI. So you can move across the entirety of the spectrum of networking without having to go and change. And that's really going to set us up for success in a future release that we have coming where we'll be doing VXLAN, MPLS, interworking, and multi-site capabilities on our borderless switching.
Okay, yeah, I see the plan. You can see the kind of plan over the last 5 or 6 years kind of coming to fruition and being able to look after all the different areas of the network. You touched on the 400 gig ZR plus optics there. And you mentioned Cassini as well. So Cassini's been in a long time. I think it came from the Telecom Infra project, that open optical packet transport project. Will the 400 gig ZR plus in bare metal replace the Cassini? Or so would you use just Cassini for kind of more long distance stuff? But can you explain what you see the benefits are because there are boxes out there now that'll take the 400 gig ZR plus and ZR optics, the big benefits for them. Obviously data center to connect, but is there other big benefits to these optics?
Yeah, so this moves a little, outside of just the data center space, but as data centers move closer to the edge and become more metro data centers, right, and they go out, you're providing those services closer. A lot of times in the metro, you used to have these line systems. You'd have you'd have your muxponders, transponder systems, all your amps, etc. Now you can start to move that functionality right into your boxes. So if you're building that 400 gig ring, you can put the ZR plus in there. You can get the distance, especially if you have the ones with the higher launch powers. Then you might be you can start removing some of those components from the line system, move that transponder functionality right into the routing platform, architecture called routed optical networking, or you might have here called IP over DWDM as well. But just being able to simplify your entire deployment on the line side so that it's you have less components, less things that can go wrong. You get the same sort of throughput, and everybody's happy. And I see a lot of applications that'll come on the metro side, out closer to the edge, where you used to have these the ROADMs.
Yeah, and obviously data center interconnect as well. To bring it back, sorry,
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting product. Like, we've done some bits with Cassini that could have been done with this maybe, and so the Cassini it's a great product. A lot of working parts. So you obviously have your optic, you still have your muxponder, you still have whatever device, and they're usually coming from different companies because it's an open networking product, so it can be quite difficult.
Yeah, I think when you really look at the difference between the Cassini and the OpenZR's ZR Plus, right? Cassini has the CF2P2 modules and I think it's a TAI interface, right? And then whereas the pluggables for ZR Plus are based off CMIS 5, so you're using the same interface QSFP DD across the board for that you'll use for your gray optics as you'll use for your long haul optics. So you don't have to go and get this special platform. You have the port there. You have the standard space port. Pop in a pluggable and you're good to go.
Yeah, you can see the benefits of it. Yeah. So okay, so you have touched on it a little bit, that all the different areas that OcNOS are working in. So kind of begs the question about maybe automation across all these areas, and what you guys, maybe specifically for the data center anyway, kind of what automation tools or platforms are available.
Yeah, so when we've been, automation isn't necessarily optional anymore, especially in the data center space, right? When people you always get the questions about ZTP and how are you going to go and provision everything. So closer to the end of the year, we're going to be launching our network management system called IP Maestro. So that'll be out, and that'll be our automation platform going forward. But we also have a lot of support for plugins, but to other methodologies. So if you're using Ansible, we publish Ansible modules on Ansible Galaxy. You can go to our GitHub page. You can download those and utilize them, right? So those are available. We publish our Yang models. We're big into OpenConfig and netconf support. So being able to choose which option you want to fit into whatever platform you're utilizing today for your automation engine, right? I mean, automation is such a tough subject because there's so many ways to do it. Everybody builds it customized around what their business workflow is and how you go from start to finish to make sure that it meets your requirements. So we've been super flexible in how we're going about that by, like I said, we have the netconf support. We've got Ansible modules that we publish so you can use into Ansible. We're doing OpenConfig, and then we have our own NMS that's going to be coming to help enable that as well. So be able to interact with any sort of give you the same choice on what you're going to do for the automation side that you have with the rest of open networking.
Very great. And that NMS obviously is going to work over the Telecom products as well, I presume?
Yeah, it'll work across our entire product portfolio. So it's going to be based off netconf support and data model driven, so that we can push those, push out the intent towards the network with the models and have the deployments that you want to see.
Okay, that's great. It's great because, as you said, it's not something. It's something everybody's looking for the data center anyway. Like it's not I would like to have kind of a tool anymore. So going forward, I suppose. So 6.3 was released, I don't know, maybe a month ago. I think 6.3.1 is out. What features came out in 6.3? This across the whole portfolio now. What kind of came out in 6.3 that was a bit more groundbreaking than before, and what is coming in the future releases?
Yeah, so I'm going to cover a little more generally than just data center here, because we did a lot, and mostly this was around bringing our feature parity on our Qumran 2 platforms. So really enabling those larger platforms to have SR MPLS capabilities, improving our EVPN capabilities so we can do layer 3 VPNs with EVPN, really start to simplify those operations by enabling the operations teams to remove some of those protocols, make the transitions from LDP-based VPLS and VPN v4 for L3 VPN and move all of that into EVPN, enable the change from RSVP-TE and LDP to SR MPLS, because like I said, we hit that feature parity, and we've moved in and expanded our offering to cover not only the larger side with the up to 4.8 terabits on the Qumran 2 with the dense 100 gig, 400 gig, but also added some fanless options on the smaller side. So now we can hit that full range of operations that we've kind of been talking about here. So, you can have your small access side where you're using the fanless, bring that up to the aggregation, core layers, peering, and hand off to your data center as well to bring it back to the data center side, and you can hit that whole spectrum of operations from access, aggregation, core, and peering, transit, and data center. So as well as the long haul with the ZR plus optics. So we've now made it so you can put IP Infusion start to finish and enable that network.
Perfect. That sounds great. So you've got every area covered. So there's no move into any other area. Is there just on a general thing like OLTs or transponders or anything like that? You guys are kind of sticking in this area with data center out to that kind of OLT, and then stop at that kind of.
Yeah, so you hit on it right. Right now we're partnering up with technology partners to be able to service the other areas, right? So we're really focusing on the Ethernet transport. So, the MPLS capabilities, being able to move the packets around, provide highly available, VPNs to come with whatever OLT you want, whether it be Tibit or any traditional OLT. Plug that in, we'll aggregate that, push that back to a BNG, go with a VBNG provider, somebody like NetElastic or somebody else, and then really start to take advantage of the capabilities of those other open networking companies and put them together into the ecosystem. So you can have that end-to-end open network, something we've been calling total network disaggregation. So we're focusing on our strengths, our core business, which is routing and switching, and being able to enable that and provide quality services and features to both the service provider, data center, marketplace.
And you certainly do, anyway, from my experience. So just finishing off, I'll ask you to predict the future, Vince. So 4 or 5 years, where do you see IPI, and where do you see open networking in general?
Yeah, so I think we've really seen kind of starting the tipping point here of open networking and the adoption of it as we continue to bring on more platforms, and as merchant silicon has really caught up. And I think there was a study not too long ago where merchant silicon had a 9,000% increase in available bandwidth, route scale, functionality, and versus some of the proprietary silicon from the bigger vendors was somewhere closer to 400. I'll have to find that and send it over to you. I think you'd be really interested. So, the disaggregated space is really just beginning, right? And we have all those capabilities that we've mentioned now. So we're providing the same SR-MPLS, EVPN, EVPN multi-homing, SRv6 is coming. All the merchant silicon now supports that and hardware. So, and we're continuing to make inroads into the largest providers across the globe, right? So it's only a matter of time before this really is considered the standard, in my opinion, right?
Yeah, and like I see it when I see any of the graphs, I see this kind of 10% up to 12, up to 14 of other, and I know what the other is, and it's mostly this stuff. And until it starts maybe being called the proper name, open networking or disaggregation, other people will take notice. But as I said, we've been evangelizing this for a decade now, and the last 2 or 3 years have been hugely successful. So long may it continue. So Vince, thank you very much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Barry. Thanks for having me on board. I hope we can have some more chats going forward.